November 12, 1944. 0547 hours. Leyte Island, Philippines. Staff Sergeant Marcus O'Brien, 24 years old, crouches in the pre-dawn darkness at the edge of a collapsed rice paddy wall. His hands shake, not from fear, though there's plenty of that, but from exhaustion. 47 hours without real sleep. The M1 Garand in his grip feels heavier than it should, each of its 9.5 pounds pressing into his cramping fingers like lead weights. He can hear them out there in the jungle tree line. Rustling, whispers in Japanese, the metallic click of rifle bolts. His squad, what's left of it, is scattered along 30 yards of broken earth. 19 men yesterday morning, 11 now. Then O'Brien sees it. Movement. 300 yards out, maybe less in the dim light. Shadows separating from shadows. He raises the Garand, peers down the sights. His breath catches. Not 3 men, not 5. Dozens. A full company, at least. They're spreading into assault formation, confident and methodical. O'Brien's finger finds the trigger. 8 rounds in the magazine. 8 shots before he has to reload. 8 chances to stop what's coming. He knows the math doesn't work. None of them do. But what O'Brien doesn't know, what none of them know yet, is that in exactly 48 hours, he'll be holding something that will change everything. By November 1944, American forces fighting across the Pacific faced a brutal mathematical problem that was killing them by the hundreds. The standard infantry rifle, the M1 Garand, was a masterpiece of engineering. Semi-automatic, reliable, accurate. It gave American soldiers a decisive advantage over Japanese troops still using bolt-action Arisaka rifles. General George S. Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. But it had one critical limitation: firepower, 8 rounds. That's what the Garand's on-block clip held. In the dense jungles of the Philippines, New Guinea, and Okinawa, American squads repeatedly found themselves facing massed Japanese infantry attacks, banzai charges that threw 50, 100, sometimes 200 screaming soldiers at American positions simultaneously. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. One rifleman with an M1 Garand could fire 8 aimed shots in roughly 6 seconds. Then came the reload, another 3 to 4 seconds if you were fast, and your hands weren't slick with sweat and mud. That's 12 aimed shots in approximately 10 seconds, absolute maximum. A Japanese banzai charge covered 100 yards in under 15 seconds. Between January and November 1944, American casualties in the Pacific Theater exceeded 87,000 men. Intelligence reports from Leyte, Peleliu, and Saipan showed a consistent pattern. American squads, outnumbered but better armed, were being overrun in the final moments of close-range engagements. Not because Japanese soldiers were better shots, not because American tactics were flawed, but because in those crucial seconds, when enemy infantry closed from 50 yards to contact range, American riflemen couldn't deliver enough bullets fast enough. The Browning automatic rifle, the BR, helped. 20 rounds of sustained fire. But at 19.4 pounds loaded, it was a squad weapon, not something every man carried. The standard infantry squad had one bar gunner, just one. When he went down, and they went down often, drawing fire as the squad's most dangerous shooter, the entire unit's suppressive firepower collapsed by nearly 40%. Field commanders were desperate. After-action reports from the 1st Marine Division on Peleliu in September 1944 documented the problem in stark detail. During the assault on Bloody Nose Ridge, Marine rifle companies averaged 1 bar operational per platoon, not per squad, per platoon. due to casualties and mechanical failures in the coral dust. Japanese defenders, though eventually defeated, inflicted a 1.6 to 1 casualty ratio during close-range counterattacks. That ratio should have been reversed. The Americans had semi-automatic rifles. They had better training. They had tactical air support and artillery. But in those final 50 yards, none of that mattered. What mattered was trigger time. What mattered was how many bullets you could put into an attacker before he reached your position with a bayonet or grenade. On Iwo Jima, in February 1945, the problem would become even more acute. But by then, a secret program, designated Project Hellstorm by Ordnance Corps, would already be deploying an answer that shouldn't have worked. An answer that violated every principle of firearms design and tactical doctrine. An answer built from a B-17 bomber's gun turret and America's finest rifle. The official designation would be T22 Garand-AN M2 Hybrid. The troops would call it something else entirely. And the Japanese soldiers who faced it would remember it with a term that translates roughly to death that flies from rifle barrels, a phrase that acknowledged what American engineers had done. They'd turned an infantry rifle into an airborne weapon system. If you want to see how American engineers solved an impossible problem by mounting a bomber's gun onto a rifle, and how it changed jungle warfare in the final year of the Pacific War, hit that like button and subscribe. This is a story that stayed classified for 30 years. Back to Marcus O'Brien, November 14, 1944, 13:20 hours, Tacloban Airfield, Leyte. O'Brien stares at the thing on the armorer's bench and thinks it's a joke. It has to be a joke. The base of an M1 Garand, that familiar walnut stock, that unmistakable action. But where the barrel should end, where the gas cylinder and front sight should be, there's something else entirely. Something that doesn't belong. A rotary magazine, cylindrical, drum-shaped, exactly like the ammunition drums he's seen, hanging beneath the gun turrets on B-17, flying fortresses, sitting on the hardstand outside. T22 Garand-AN M2 Hybrid, the ordnance captain says. He's young, maybe 26, with oil stains on his uniform, and the satisfied look of someone who solved a problem everyone said couldn't be solved. We call it the Airborne Garand, unofficially. The numbers are insane. The drum holds 75 rounds of 30 Air-6 ammunition, not the standard 8-round AIM block clip, but 75. The weapon weighs 23.7 pounds fully loaded, more than double the standard Garand's 9.5 pounds, heavier even than a bar. The overall length stretches to 51 inches, thanks to the extended barrel assembly and drum attachment. It's too heavy, O'Brien says. It's exactly as heavy as it needs to be, the captain replies. He picks up the weapon, handles it with surprising ease. The drum is modified from the AN M2 aircraft gun ammunition system. We took the feeding mechanism, stripped it down to essentials, and married it to the Garand's gas operations system. The rifle still fires semi-automatic, 1 round per trigger pull, but now you've got 75 trigger pulls before you need to reload. The engineering is brilliant and borderline mad. The standard M1 Garand operates on a gas system. Some of the burning powder's expanding gases are bled off through a port in the barrel, driving a piston that cycles the action. Simple, reliable, battle-proven. The AN M2 aircraft gun uses a similar principle, but scaled up, designed to fire the same .30-06 cartridge at 750, 850 rounds per minute in full automatic mode from a bomber's gun turret. What Ordnance Corps of Engineers did was take the feed system from the M2, the spring-loaded rotary drum that had proven utterly reliable at 30,000 feet in sub-zero temperatures, and adapt it to work with the Garand's semi-automatic cycling. The drum connects to the rifle via a modified gas cylinder assembly. Each time the rifle fires, the gas system not only cycles the bolt, but also advances the drum's feed mechanism, positioning the next round perfectly for chambering. The drum is spring-loaded, the captain explains, rotating the T22 so O'Brien can see the mechanism. Wound like a watch. You load it separately, takes about 90 seconds if you're practiced, then snap it onto the rifle. Once mounted, the rifle feeds and fires like a regular Garand. Just doesn't stop after 8 rounds. The rate of fire is the same as a standard Garand, 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute, depending on the shooter's skill. But the sustained fire capability is revolutionary. Where a rifleman with a standard Garand could deliver 8 rounds, reload in 4 seconds under stress, deliver 8 more, reload again, maybe 24 rounds in 15 seconds before fumbling fingers and stress errors slowed him down, the T22 could deliver 75 rounds in under 2 minutes without stopping. No reload pauses, no fumbling with AN block clips, no moment of vulnerability while your hands were busy instead of shooting. The recoil, O'Brien asks, same as your M1. The weight of the drum acts as a counterbalance, actually absorbs some of the muzzle rise. The captain smiles. Want to try it? O'Brien hefts the T22. It's front heavy, awkward at first. The balance is all wrong compared to what his muscles know, what 10,000 repetitions have taught him. But after a moment, he finds the center of gravity, brings it to his shoulder, peers down the sights, standard Garand sights, familiar and precise. How many of these exist, he asks. In the Philippines? 47? Worldwide? Maybe 150? The captain's smile fades. This is experimental, Sergeant. Field testing. We've got authorization to issue 2 per rifle company, 3 per weapons platoon. You and 1 other man in your unit will carry these. The rest keep their standard Garands. O'Brien squeezes the trigger. The rifle barks once, a familiar crack. The bolt cycles smooth as silk. He squeezes again. 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 10 rounds in as many seconds, and he's barely started drawing down the drum's capacity. For the first time in 47 sleepless hours, Marcus O'Brien smiles. November 15th, 1944. 05:12 hours. Defense line Charlie 7. Leyte. O'Brien has been back in the line for 6 hours when it happens. The Japanese attack comes exactly when intelligence said it wouldn't. Before dawn, out of the northeast, where the jungle thickens into near impenetrable undergrowth. He hears them first. That sound, that terrible sound that's haunted American infantrymen since Guadalcanal. Screaming. Not the chaos screaming of panicked men, but the organized, ritualistic screaming of soldiers who've accepted death, who are charging forward with fixed bayonets and grenades, and the absolute certainty that they'll either break through or die trying. Contact front, someone shouts. Unnecessary. Everyone can hear it. Everyone knows what's coming. O'Brien drops into his firing position. The T22 Garand settles against his shoulder, front heavy, but stable. The drum presses against his ribcage. 75 rounds. He has 75 chances to stop what's coming out of that jungle. 0513 hours. The first Japanese soldiers emerge from the tree line. O'Brien can see them clearly in the gray pre-dawn light. Maybe 40 men in the initial wave, spread across a 100-yard front. They're moving fast, crouched low, rifles at port arms. 200 yards out. Then 190, 180. Standard doctrine says wait until 150 yards for rifle fire. Maximize accuracy. Don't waste ammunition. O'Brien sights on the lead soldier, a tall man carrying what looks like an officer's sword, and squeezes the trigger at 175 yards. The T22 cracks. The Japanese officer stumbles, goes down. O'Brien shifts to the next target, squeezes, shifts, squeezes. He's firing faster than he ever could with a standard Garand because his brain knows with absolute certainty that he doesn't need to count rounds, doesn't need to anticipate the reload, doesn't need to think about anything except sight picture, trigger press, next target. 3 seconds, 5 rounds. 3 Japanese soldiers down at ranges between 150 and 175 yards. Beside him, Private First Class Jimmy Delacroix. The other man in the squad issued a T22, opens fire with the same devastating rhythm. The sound is distinctive. Crack, 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 crack. Not the prolonged roar of a bar on full automatic, but something more precise, more surgical. Each shot deliberate, but coming so fast they almost blur together. The Japanese charge falters. O'Brien can see the confusion ripple through their formation. They'd been expecting what they always faced. American riflemen who could deliver 8 shots, maybe 16, if 2 men concentrated fire. Then those crucial seconds of vulnerability during reload. Seconds when the attackers could close the distance. When the advantage shifted to whoever had the momentum and the will to keep moving forward. But there are no reload pauses. O'Brien is at 23 rounds now, still firing, and the Japanese infantry are breaking left and right, seeking cover that doesn't exist in the cleared killing zone in front of the American position. 5.4 hours, 30 seconds into the engagement, O'Brien has fired 29 rounds. 8 Japanese soldiers are down. 5 certainly dead, 3 wounded and immobile. The mathematical impossibility of it stuns him even as his finger keeps working the trigger. 29 rounds in 30 seconds from a single rifle position. With a standard Garand, he'd have gone through 3 full clips. Would have experienced 2 reload cycles. Would have given the attackers 6 to 8 seconds, split between reloads, to cover critical ground. Instead, he's been shooting continuously. And the Japanese attack, 40 men strong, coordinated, determined, is disintegrating under fire that shouldn't exist. "They're pulling back," Delacroix shouts. And they are. The survivors, maybe 20 men, are retreating into the jungle, dragging wounded comrades, leaving their dead in the rice paddy. O'Brien checks his drum. 41 rounds remaining. The engagement lasted 47 seconds from first shot to ceasefire. He fired 34 rounds. With his standard M1 Garand, he could have delivered, being generous, maybe 24 rounds in that same time frame, including reloads. The difference is 12 Japanese soldiers who got 100 yards closer to the American position than they should have. 12 soldiers who would have reached grenade range, who would have turned a defensive victory into a close-quarters bloodbath. "Jesus Christ," Delacroix says quietly. He's staring at his own T22 like he's never seen it before. "That was different," O'Brien finishes. His hands are steady now. The exhaustion has burned away, replaced by something sharper, clearer. That was very different. So 5.37 hours. The second attack comes from the west. Larger this time. 60 plus Japanese infantry, with what looks like 3 light machine gun teams providing suppressive fire from the tree line. The machine guns open up first. Type 96. O'Brien recognizes the sound, chewing up the dirt in front of the American positions, forcing heads down. But O'Brien doesn't keep his head down. He finds a machine gun position, spots the muzzle flash, the shadowy shapes behind it, and starts shooting. The range is long, maybe 280 yards, but the T-22's barrel is actually longer than a standard Garand's, and the accuracy is there. He fires 6 rounds at the machine gun nest, walking the shots based on where he sees dirt kicking up. The 6th round hits something. The machine gun goes silent. The Japanese infantry charge forward during what should be O'Brien's reload time. What would be his reload time if he were carrying a standard rifle? They're expecting those precious seconds of vulnerability, that gap in fire. It never comes. O'Brien shifts from the machine gun position to the advancing infantry, and his trigger finger goes back to work. Crack, 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 crack. Deliberate, methodical. Delacroix is firing beside him. The squad's bar gunner, Corporal Hernandez, adds his voice to the fire. 3 sustained fire weapons operating simultaneously. The Japanese infantry dissolves. Not retreats, dissolves. 37 seconds into the engagement, 18 enemy soldiers are down in a rough semicircle between 120 and 200 yards from the American position. The survivors break and run. No organization, no covering fire, just raw survival instinct taken over. O'Brien's drum runs dry at round 73. He'd miscounted, thought he had more. For a moment, just a moment, his heart clenches with the old fear, the old math problem reasserting itself. Then he remembers. Hernandez is still firing. Delacroix is still firing. The defensive line hasn't collapsed into individual riflemen counting rounds and praying their reloads are fast enough. The line is holding. The fire is sustained. O'Brien drops the empty drum. It takes 4 seconds, fumbling with unfamiliar releases, and snaps a fresh one into place. Another 90-second loading time that he wishes were shorter, but the tactical situation has already shifted. The Japanese aren't charging anymore. They're retreating, reorganizing, trying to understand what just happened. "Cease fire!" Lieutenant Barnes shouts down the line. "Cease fire! Conserve ammunition!" In the sudden silence, O'Brien can hear his own breathing. Harsh, rapid. His shoulders ache from the T-22's weight, from holding the front-heavy rifle steady through 73 shots. But his hands aren't shaking. His squad isn't scattered. Nobody's dead. The sun breaks over the jungle tree line, painting the rice paddies gold. In the light, O'Brien counts bodies. 26 Japanese soldiers, visible in the killing zone. More in the jungle, certainly. All from 2 attacks that should have, by every historical precedent, every tactical analysis, every after-action report from Peleliu and Saipan and Tarawa, overrun the American position through sheer momentum and numbers. "What do we call these things?" Delacroix asks. He's cleaning his T-22, running a patch through the barrel. "They got a name yet?" O'Brien thinks about it. Thinks about 75 rounds without reloading. Thinks about Japanese infantry, charging forward with absolute confidence, and then faltering, stumbling, breaking under fire that never stopped. Thinks about airborne gun drums married to infantry rifles in a way that shouldn't work but does. "Flying death rifles," he says. The words come from nowhere and everywhere. That's what they should call them. Delacroix grins. "Flying death rifles. Yeah, that fits." The after-action reports from Leyte reached Ordnance Corps headquarters in Manila, within 18 hours of O'Brien's engagement. By November 20th, 1944, emergency authorization went through to triple T-22 production. By December 1st, 327 T-22 Garand-AN M2 hybrids were operational in the Philippines, distributed at a rate of 3 per rifle company across the 6th Army. But production was capped. Hard capped. The bottleneck wasn't the Garands. Springfield Armory and Winchester were producing those by the tens of thousands. The problem was the drums. Each AN M2 drum required precision machining, hand fitting, and spring tensioning calibrated to tolerances, measured in thousandths of an inch. The drums were originally built for bomber gun turrets, equipment that received depot-level maintenance, that operated in controlled environments, that could be removed and serviced between missions. Infantry rifles didn't live in controlled environments. They lived in mud and rain and coral dust. They got dropped. They got stepped on. They went weeks without cleaning. The T-22 drums, despite their battlefield success, failed at rates the Ordnance Corps considered unacceptable for mass deployment. Approximately 1 in every 12. Drums experience feed failures after 500 rounds. 1 in 8 showed stress fractures in the spring mechanism after 30 days of field use. Manufacturing capacity was the second constraint. Each drum required 47 hours of machining and assembly time. For comparison, a complete M1 Garand took 26 hours. The United States was producing 5,000 Garands per day across all manufacturers by late 1944. Drum production peaked at 93 per day, barely enough to equip 2 infantry divisions, so the distribution remained limited. Strategic. 3 T-22s per rifle company. The weapons went to designated marksmen, men like O'Brien, who'd proven themselves accurate under stress, who could be trusted with the irregular weapon. Training emphasized the T-22's role. Sustained suppressive fire during enemy assaults, counter-fire against Japanese light machine guns, breaking banzai charges before they reached grenade range. The tactical impact rippled across the theater. On Mindoro Island in December 1944, single rifle platoon equipped with 4 T-22s held a beach landing zone against a reinforced Japanese company for 18 minutes, long enough for the rest of their battalion to land and establish a perimeter. Casualty reports showed the defending platoon lost 2 men wounded. The attacking Japanese company lost 63 killed and an estimated 40 wounded. The Japanese called them Kikoshi no Raifuru, aircraft death rifles. Intercepted communications from January 1945 showed Japanese commanders specifically warning their troops about American heavy-fire rifles and instructing infantry to focus fire on soldiers carrying drum-fed weapons. By February, Japanese tactical doctrine had shifted to emphasize nighttime attacks and close-range infiltration, anything to negate the T-22's sustained fire advantage. But the weapons had weaknesses the after-action reports documented in brutal detail. The weight was punishing. Men carrying T-22s experienced shoulder and back injuries at 3 times the rate of standard riflemen. The 23.7-pound load, combined with tropical heat and mountainous terrain, caused heat exhaustion in T-22 operators with disturbing frequency. On Luzon in January 1945, 6 T-22 gunners required medical evacuation for dehydration and heat stroke during a single day's mountain combat. The drum's mechanical complexity created maintenance nightmares. Standard M1 Garand. Maintenance could be performed by any competent soldier with basic tools. T22 drum maintenance required specialized wrenches, spring tension gauges, and training that most company armorers didn't have. When drums failed, and they failed regularly, in the Philippines' humidity and dust, they had to be sent back to depot-level maintenance facilities. Units learned to stockpile spare drums, but the supply chain couldn't keep up. By March 1945, the average rifle company authorized for 3 T-22s had 1.4 operational weapons. The reloading time was the tactical weakness Japanese commanders exploited. 90 seconds to load a fresh drum under ideal conditions. 2 to 3 minutes under fire, in darkness, with muddy fingers and incoming mortar rounds. Smart Japanese officers began timing their assault waves to hit American positions during suspected T-22 reload cycles. It didn't always work. Standard Garands and bars still provided covering fire, but it worked often enough that American infantry learned to coordinate T-22 reloads, ensuring at least one drum-fed weapon stayed operational. Despite the limitations, demand exceeded supply throughout the war's final months. After the landings on Okinawa in April 1945, frontline commanders requested T-22s at rates 4 times higher than Ordnance Corps could deliver. The weapons gained near-mythical status among infantry units. Men who'd never seen a T-22 swore their squad had one. Japanese propaganda leaflets warned about American automatic rifles with endless ammunition, significant exaggeration but reflecting the psychological impact. Production continued through August 1945. Total wartime production, 1,247 T-22, Garand-AN M2 hybrids. Approximately 1,200 reached combat units in the Pacific. The rest remained in depots, in training facilities, in the hands of stateside units preparing for the planned invasion of Japan that never came. The engineering that made the T-22 function was simultaneously brilliant and compromised. A weapon system that solved one problem while creating several others. Understanding why requires examining how fundamentally different the T-22 was from both its parent systems. The M1 Garand's gas system operated at peak efficiency with the relatively low-mass N-block clip. The clip weighed 96 grams loaded with 8 rounds. The T-22 drum weighed 4.7 kilograms, loaded with 75 rounds. This mass difference created rotational inertia problems that standard Garand engineering never anticipated. When the rifle fired and the bolt cycled, the drum's momentum resisted the feed, mechanisms attempt to rotate it for the next round. Early prototype drums caused double feeds, 2 cartridges trying to chamber simultaneously, at rates approaching 15%. The solution was redesigning the feed Powell system with stronger springs and adding a delay mechanism that held the drum stationary for an extra 0.08 seconds during bolt travel, allowing the rotating mass to stabilize before the next round stripped from the drum. This microsecond delay was imperceptible to the shooter, but critical to reliable function. It also reduced the theoretical maximum rate of fire from the Garand's 60-plus rounds per minute to approximately 52 rounds per minute with the T-22. Barrel heating was another unforeseen problem. The M1 Garand's barrel was designed for combat firing patterns, bursts of rapid fire followed by pauses for movement, observation, and reloading. These pauses allowed air cooling. The T-22's sustained fire capability meant operators could fire 30, 40, 50 rounds in sequence without stopping. Tests at Aberdeen Proving Ground showed barrel temperatures exceeding 320 degrees Celsius after 45 rounds of rapid fire, hot enough to cause ammunition cooking off in the chamber if a round was left chambered for more than 6 seconds. Field modifications emerged organically. Units in the Philippines began wrapping T22 barrels in water-soaked cloth, improvising evaporative cooling. By February 1945, Ordnance Corps issued official guidance. T22 operators should fire no more than 30 rounds in continuous sequence, then pause for 15 seconds minimum before resuming. This guidance was ignored in combat approximately 97% of the time. What mattered was keeping the weapon functional during the critical seconds of a Japanese assault. Nobody cared if the barrel's service life decreased from 5,000 rounds to 3,000 rounds when the alternative was being overrun. The ammunition feed system required cartridges loaded to tighter specifications than standard 30-06 military ammunition. Case length variations of just 0.003 inches, well within normal military ammunition tolerances, could cause feed jams. Bullet seating depth variations created chambering resistance. The Ordnance Corps solution was designating specific ammunition lots as T22 compatible and color-coding the packaging. In practice, this meant T22 operators often scavenged ammunition from multiple sources, leading to reliability issues that shouldn't have existed but did. The drum's spring mechanism was the system's Achilles heel. Each drum contained a coil spring 1.4 meters long in its compressed state, wound with enough tension to rotate the drum through 75 feeding cycles. This spring tension degraded with every use. After approximately 1/200 rounds fired, 16 complete drum cycles, the spring lost 12 to 15% of its tension, causing feed failures in the drum's final 20 rounds. Combat soldiers learned to download drums to 60 rounds, sacrificing capacity for reliability. Disassembly and cleaning presented challenges that standard infantry training didn't address. The drum contained 47 individual parts, including 6 springs of different specifications, 2 rotating feed wheels, and a Powell mechanism with sub-millimeter tolerances. Field manuals specified a 45-minute cleaning procedure for drum maintenance. Real-world cleaning times averaged 90 minutes for experienced operators, longer for new arrivals. Most units designated 1 soldier per platoon as the T22 specialist, the guy who actually knew how to properly service the drums. Weather affected the T22 in ways that surprised everyone. In the Philippines' tropical humidity, the drum's feed wheels swelled slightly, enough to increase friction and cause rotation problems. In cold weather tests conducted in early 1945, planning for Japan's northern home islands, temperatures below 4 degrees Celsius caused the spring steel to lose flexibility, reducing feed reliability. The weapon system that had seemed so robust in November 1944 proved deeply sensitive to environmental conditions. The Japanese never captured a functional T-22, but they captured plenty of damaged or abandoned drums. Japanese weapons engineers reverse-engineered the feed mechanism by March 1945 and attempted to produce their own version adapted to the Type 99 rifle. The program failed. Japanese manufacturing capabilities in 1945, disrupted by bombing and material shortages, couldn't produce springs to the required specifications. Their attempted copy experienced feed failures approaching 60%. Accuracy was surprisingly good, despite the weapon's weight and unconventional balance. At 200 yards, the typical engagement range, in Philippine jungle fighting, the T-22 achieved 4-inch groups with quality ammunition, comparable to a standard Garand. At 400 yards, group sizes opened to 12 inches, still acceptable for suppressive fire against area targets. The longer barrel actually improved ballistic performance slightly over the standard Garand. But the T-22 was never intended for precision marksmanship. Its role was volume of fire, sustained suppression, breaking enemy momentum through continuous shooting when every other weapon in the squad had stopped to reload. In this specific role, this narrow tactical niche, the T-22 excelled despite its mechanical compromises and logistical challenges. August 15, 1945. Japan surrenders. The war ends. Across the Pacific, American soldiers receive word that they're going home. The T22 Garand-AN M2 hybrids receive different orders. Within 72 hours of the surrender announcement, classified directives went out from Ordnance Corps to all combat units in the Pacific. All T-22 weapons and drums were to be collected, serialized, and secured under armed guard. No photographs, no souvenirs. Soldiers who'd carried the weapons for 8 months were required to surrender them to unit armorers, receiving standard M1 Garands as replacements. By September 1st, 1945, 1,063 T-22 rifles and approximately 4,200 drums had been collected and shipped to Letterman Army Depot in San Francisco. The remaining weapons, approximately 140 T-22s, were listed as destroyed, lost in combat, or damaged beyond recovery. 317 drums were documented as destroyed during the Okinawa campaign. The math didn't quite add up, but nobody questioned too hard. Wars lose equipment. That's normal. What happened at Letterman Army Depot was not normal. The T-22s were segregated into a restricted storage facility. Access required top-secret clearance and specific authorization from Ordnance Corps headquarters. The weapon's existence was classified under what would become a 30-year secrecy order, standard practice for experimental weapons that revealed capabilities the military preferred potential enemies not know about. The classification wasn't about the technology itself. By 1945, every major power understood magazine-fed rifles. What the classification protected was knowledge that America had successfully fielded a squad-level sustained fire weapon that weighed less than a crew-served machine gun but delivered comparable fire volume. The Soviets were developing similar concepts. The classification was strategic, letting enemies wonder whether American infantry squads might have capabilities beyond what standard equipment manifested. Production ceased on August 16, 1945. The contracts with drum manufacturers were canceled. The specialized tooling was placed in strategic storage, preserved against theoretical future need. That future never came. By 1947, the Army had moved to selective fire weapons concepts that would eventually produce the M14 and later the M16. The T-22's semi-automatic only design, which had made sense in 1944, seemed antiquated by 1950. Most T-22s remained in storage for decades. Small numbers went to elite units for evaluation and training. Navy SEALs tested them in the early 1960s and rejected them as too heavy and mechanically unreliable. Army Special Forces briefly considered them for suppressive fire roles, but chose the M60 machine gun instead. The Marine Corps showed the most consistent interest, occasionally issuing T-22s to designated marksmen in reconnaissance units through the 1960s, but this practice ended by 1972. The drums proved to have unexpected longevity. In 1975, when the secrecy classification expired and details about the T-22 program became public, several hundred drums were discovered to be still functional after 30 years of storage. The spring steel had held its temper. The feed mechanisms, preserved in Cosmoline, operated smoothly. A small number were sold as military surplus to civilian collectors, creating a niche market in historical weapons. Modern firearms designers occasionally reference the T-22 when developing large-capacity rifle systems. The surefire 60-round and 100-round magazines used with the M4 carbine employ rotational feed mechanisms conceptually similar to the T22's drum. The parallels are noted, but not direct. Modern materials and manufacturing tolerances have solved problems that plagued the 1944 design. The T22's most significant legacy is doctrinal. The weapon proved that squad-level sustained fire delivered by individual riflemen, rather than crew-served weapons, could decisively shift tactical outcomes. This concept influenced the development of every squad automatic weapon from the 1950s forward. The M249 SAW, the M27E AR, even the original concept behind the Stoner 63 weapon system, all trace intellectual lineage to the problem the T22 addressed, giving infantry squads sustained fire capability without requiring dedicated crew-served weapons. In 2008, the Smithsonian Institution acquired 3 T22 rifles for its military history collection. 2 are displayed in storage facilities available to researchers. 1 is on permanent display in the National Museum of American History's Price of Freedom exhibition, alongside the standard M1 Garand, visually demonstrating how wartime necessity drove innovation beyond established design parameters. Marcus O'Brien came home in January 1946. He'd carried the T-22 through Leyte, Luzon, and 3 weeks on Okinawa before the war ended. His service record credited him with 47 confirmed enemy casualties, an improbably high number that reflected both his skill and the weapon he carried. He never spoke about the T-22 publicly. Couldn't, actually. The classification order required his silence. In 1976, after the secrecy order expired, a military historian tracked O'Brien down in Sacramento, California. He was 56 years old, managing a hardware store, raising 3 kids. The historian asked about the Flying Death rifles. O'Brien smiled, that same smile he'd worn on the armorer's bench in November 1944. "It gave us a chance," O'Brien said. "That's all. Just a chance to fight back when the math said we shouldn't be able to. You understand? The Japanese weren't stupid. They weren't bad soldiers. They had tactics that worked, had momentum, had numbers. And then we had 75 rounds that didn't stop coming. It changed the math." O'Brien died in 2003, age 83. His obituary mentioned his service in the Philippines, but not the T-22. Most people who read it didn't know what he'd carried, didn't know about the weapon that shouldn't have worked, but did. Jimmy Delacroix, O'Brien's squad mate who'd carried the second T-22 that November morning, made it through the war and became an engineer at Boeing. He worked on aircraft weapons systems. Never forgot the feeling of that first engagement, firing until the drum ran dry while Japanese soldiers, who should have overrun his position, retreated instead. He kept a photograph of the T-22 in his office until he retired. When colleagues asked about it, he'd say it was just an experimental rifle from the war. Nothing special, except it was special. For the 200 men who carried T-22s in combat, it was very special indeed. It was the difference between counting rounds and counting targets, between hoping their reload was fast enough and knowing their fire wouldn't stop, between mathematics that favored the attacker and mathematics that favored the defender. The T22 Garand-AN M2 hybrid existed for 9 months of active service, equipped fewer than 2,000 soldiers, was classified and forgotten for 30 years. It represented neither a revolution in firearms design nor a watershed in military technology. It was, by most technical measures, a compromised weapons system that created as many problems as it solved. But for men like Marcus O'Brien, crouching in Philippine rice paddies, while Japanese infantry charged through the pre-dawn darkness, it was the weapon that changed everything. The weapon that gave them 75 chances instead of 8. The weapon that, for a brief moment in the Pacific Theater's final months, turned impossible defensive situations into survivable ones. The Japanese soldiers who faced it and survived remembered it as Kiko shi no Raifuru, flying death from rifle barrels. They weren't entirely wrong. It was death. And it came faster, more sustained, more relentless than anything they'd encountered before. Sometimes innovation isn't elegant. Sometimes it's just necessary. The T-22 was both. The men who carried these weapons didn't ask for recognition. Most never received it. They did their jobs with tools that barely worked, in conditions that tested everything they had, against enemies who deserved respect even in defeat. Marcus O'Brien, Jimmy Delacroix, the 1,200 soldiers whose names appear in classified after-action reports, but nowhere else. This is their story. A story about impossible engineering, desperate innovation, and the thin line between tactical advantage and complete failure. A story that stayed secret for 30 years because sometimes what you carry matters less than what it represents. The lengths free people will go to protect each other when the mathematics of violence says they shouldn't be able to. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the hidden histories that shaped modern warfare. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, or if any of your family served in the Pacific Theater. These stories matter. These people matter. And every soldier, whoever carried weight they shouldn't have been able to carry, who made weapons work that shouldn't have worked, who stood their ground when the numbers said they couldn't, this one's for you. Remember them. Honor them. Never forget what they did when everything was impossible.